and welcome back to Animal Liberation TV. So finally I'm getting around to doing the explanation of Agenda 2022. So it has been a bit of a slow start to the year for me, and I'll explain that in a couple of videos time about stuff. But anyway, so it's still early in the year, really, the start of May. We've seen a lot of interesting things happen in the animal liberation movement the last few months. But I'm not going to do a roundup of the news because that's not really what this channel is about. There's other channels that do a much better job of a roundup of current news. But there is lots of really interesting stuff going on. Anyway, Agenda 2022 still applies. It's still early in the year, and in this short series I made four videos, 4 parts. I'm going to briefly explain about each part now, and the main theme of Agenda 2022 is the sort of slogan for it, which was Organise, Recruit and Activate. Okay, so I mean those are kind of the sort of common themes of any movement, really. Any movement that wants to be successful has to do all of those things, doesn't it? Last year, for 2021, I did a thing called Oath 2021. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's had quite a lot of views. That, I think over 600 or something. So I don't know how many of you felt like you took Oath 2021, which was a decision to redouble our efforts to make a bit of a difference last year. But regardless of whether people watched that video and decided to sort of redouble their efforts and take a bit of an oath to themselves, last year was a successful and really kind of quite pinnacle moment of recent times with the Camp Beagle and the Free the MBR Beagles campaign and all the things associated with that. So certainly last year was a momentous year in terms of the modern animal liberation movement, and certainly the anti-vivisection part of that movement, which I happen to believe are one and the same thing. But anyway, so Organise, Recruit and Activate. In part one, we had music by Dead Prez. In the second bit, Down, which is all about kind of having a revolutionary attitude, but not just having the talk, is that when the shit goes down, you're going to be there for each other, comrades in struggle. And I really like the lyrics for that because I think they sum up any ideology of a revolutionary or reactionary group or militant group. And to that music I had quite a bit of Hunt Sab video stuff, and also I think that video started off with and also had some footage from Animal Liberation League stuff in the 80s. I think it might be in the Southeast Animal Liberation League SEAL. I'm not sure though, because I think it was Kent, wasn't it? There was a lab raid, and there's a few other bits of older stuff in there as well. There's also Keith Mann is featured in that, which Keith Mann's featured in quite a few of my videos, and as I've said before in the podcast, I can't remember which one it was now, the Angels of Mercy one, is it 6 or something, I'm not sure, where I did Angels of Mercy, a Channel 4 film. In that I kind of tried to explain the role Keith's had in the movement and how it's impossible for me to visualise a modern animal rights movement such as it is without the involvement of Keith Mann. That's my personal opinion. I mean, my argument for that would be I was there. I saw what was going on back in the 90s and his participation in that. So he's featured in that a little bit. And the main part of that video, which is probably at a first glance seems like a really boring stretch of footage, is actually probably one of the most sort of important pieces of evidence we've got of the effectiveness of the secondary and tertiary targets, and especially within the Shack campaign, because that was a couple of the people who organised Shack. You can hear their voices, arranged and a meeting with some investment bankers. I think they made out they had a big inheritance and wanted to invest a lot of money in shares, and that they'd seen hunting and life sciences shares were low, so they asked about investing in them. Anyway, the investment bankers in this undercover, they secretly filmed like a bit of undercover footage of this meeting with these investment bankers about buying shares in HLS, now Labcorp. In that, the bankers state over and over again how totally risky and unworthwhile it is for them to put an investment in such a company that's got so much negative attention. And they list some of the stuff like some of their clients have had, bigger clients had people squatting on their front lawn in protest. One of the companies that invested in HLS Labcorp. So that is very revealing. It just shows you how very successful those tactics were. And if we got back to that level again, we're talking about the closure of Labcorp, or them selling off those premises in the UK. So it's very, very important, that bit of footage. It seems like the most boring piece of footage and discussion ever, but it's actually probably the most important piece of evidence we've got of how successful the movement can be at its pinnacle. Or it's one example anyway of one moment. So to me, that was an incredible piece of information. So I hope people do watch that and pick up on that and the implications and the tactics and the strength of movement and the size we need to do that. Okay. So part two, that started off with some stuff around the New Church guinea pig farm, and featured in that are Kerry and Johnny, who I know, both of those people. And there was a third person who also got time with them for this, but they were convicted of conspiracy to blackmail against the New Church guinea pig farm. Specifically, the police were alleging they were involved in the grave digging, or insinuating that that was part of the blackmail campaign and that they knew about it at the very least. So the grave digging, I've got little clips about that in other stuff. I'm not going to go into that right now. But they got 12 years for that. So Johnny and Kerry that are featured in that, and you see Johnny outside New Church guinea pig farm, and Kerry giving a speech. They did 6 years, all three of them, and John, Big John, who's not featured in the video. They all got 12 years, and they did half of that, 6 years, and then they had 6 years of monitoring under probation with all sorts of conditions and stuff after that. So, you've got to pay respect to these people. This goes to the heart of the idea of self-sacrifice, that they're just three examples. Those three guys that got 12 years and did half, 6 years, and then had probation for another 6. That's an example of the self-sacrifice some people have made towards the struggle for animal liberation. They're just 3 examples. There's over 200 people, I think, in the UK alone have gone to prison in the struggle for animal liberation. So, Johnny and Kerry, 6 years each. They're in the first part of that video. Then, in Agenda 2022, Part 2, there's a little midsection about, briefly mentions the successful campaign to stop a lab in Cambridge, and then it talks about the attempts to stop the Oxford lab getting built and the government support for it. Again, a really big part of the history of the modern animal liberation movement. Very successful stuff. And then the last part of that, I put some sort of footage for a bit of a laugh, really, with Keith Mann being a bit mischievous and having a fire in his garden. And then there's some arson footage, which is kind of what the police kind of link Keith Mann with, that sort of style of action, because he was arrested for attempted arson at a poultry unit, attempted arson on the trucks there in Kent in October 91. Okay, so that's Agenda 2022 Part 2. In Part 3, so Part 2 was to show the New Church campaign, the Oxford and Cambridge got mentioned, and then the sort of arson campaign of the 90s. But that's actually from Holland, that footage. But there was also a big arson campaign there, and a couple of guys got a few years there. I think one of them was called Frank, from what I remember. Anyway, so I've tried to pick some of the sort of highlights of the movement in some way or other. And in part 3, very much the case for this one was Hillgrove Farm, Hillgrove Cat Farm. There's a campaign against them for, I think in my memory, this is a long time ago, and a lot was going on in that period in the 90s. I think it was about 3 years that the Save the Hillgrove Cats campaign was going on for. And I will talk in more detail about all of that at some point in the channel, but essentially, due to the whole campaign, Farmer Brown, he finally shut Hillgrove Cats. And let's not forget, I mean, I always mention this sort of thing, but the Hillgrove Cats campaign was kind of half spawned by Barry during his first hunger strike. In a sense, it brought it back on the agenda when there was a spontaneous demo there, after maybe a demo outside the prison, because I think he was in Bullingdon in Oxfordshire on remand for a little bit. He wasn't in Bristol the whole time, and an action took place at Hillgrove Cats, and some people broke into the sheds. In fact, one of our mates did a little bit of time for nicking one of the cats from the sheds, and I've talked about that in podcast 3, where I show some photos from that daylight liberation. Anyway, and then also Barry did his second hunger strike, I think, when the Hillgrove Cats campaign was going. So that again brought a lot of momentum to it. And, there's lots of highlights of the Hillgrove Cat campaign. I mean, the main highlight is it was successful and the farm closed eventually. It took quite a lot. That guy was stubborn, and some of these people are stubborn. And they get a lot of government and police backing, and dozens of people went to prison for that Hillgrove Farm riot, which is what I feature in the second part of that part 3 episode. And that's the Hillgrove Farm riot. Dozens of people went to prison for that. There were loads of undercover police in the crowd. They had helicopter footage. They had police from those little turrets. You can see they built a fortress around the farm because it was a World Day for Lab Animals. And it said, wear black for the animals. And, I will talk about this extensively in some other part of this series, the Hillgrove Cat Farm riot. But that was one, not that I was there, of course, because lots of people went to prison for that, so I'm not going to. But if I had been there, I'm sure that would have been one of the best days of my life. And I'll find out the full story of what happened there so I can convey it to you in some future episode, probably in Badger Stories. Okay, so that was part 3. Part 4, which hasn't had anywhere near as many views. I don't know if it's because it was a bit controversial or something. There's quite a lot of hunt stabbing footage, and there's the song Suspect Device by, is it Stiff Little Fingers? Anyway, I mixed that in with a bit of Justice Department stuff, which was a splinter group from the Animal Liberation Front, which was active in the mid-90s, and one of our friends, Gurge, was accused of being one of the Justice Department bombers, and he got 6 years. He did remand on Category A on the top floor of Winston Green with Fred West, this is his neighbour, next door neighbour. So Gurge was accused of being one of the Justice Department bombers, as they say, and other people were suspected of being involved in those campaigns. And the Justice Department was a group that didn't stick, a bit like the Animal Rights Militia, is a group that doesn't follow the non-violence ethics of the ALF, which is about non-violent direct action, of course. And so these devices, letter bombs, the Justice Department sent over 100 devices in something like 6 months in, I think it was the second part of 1994, something like that, or the whole of 94 sort of thing. So that covers that, and there's clips of hunt violence, which I've mentioned before. They're violent scum, blood junkies we call them, hunt scum we call them as well. I have absolutely no time for those people, and You see a little bit of the fighting going on with that, and I haven't really covered sabbing so much in this channel because I am sort of more focused on the sort of the more militant stuff, I suppose. But hunt sabbing is where my roots certainly, and I'll mention this in probably the next episode of Badger's Stories. Hunt sabbing was kind of my roots in the animal rights movement. That's how I got in, got involved, and it's, you know, I used to love it. And sabbing is a central part of the animal liberation movement historically and at this very moment. You know, I think over 100 sabs turned up for the glorious 12th shooting stuff last August up on the moors, I think. So that's an impressive number. So those are the 4 parts of Agenda 2022. There's a lot more I could say about all of that. But basically, what I wanted to do was show you kind of a little bit of the extent and some of the real highs and some of the victories in the movement, to give you sort of kind of encouragement to see how full and historical this movement is, and see that things like that Hillgrove Farm riot, where there were, I mean, you know, I will talk about this probably at some point, there were thousands of us, I'd say, I don't know, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 of us, and maybe about 1,000 police anyway, all day long. We had the police, you see it on that video, they kept trying to break out of those metal gate things they had in their fortress they built around the farm, and they got shoved back by thousands of people all in black. All day long, rocks and mud were hurled at them all day long. There's another charge in the top field where they came down on the field, loads of them, hundreds of them, maybe 500 in riot gear, and about 1,000 of us in black hurled rocks at them. Well, when I say us, collectively as a movement, and pushed them back. From what I've heard happened. So, yeah, that's those days. Not that I'm encouraging that sort of behaviour, but those days can happen again. The same as with the Oxford lab and the Cambridge lab, a new church which closed the farm down, and also in episode 1 where we see the HLS, now LabCorp, how much trouble they were in due to the campaign, the secondary and tertiary targeting of financial support, investors, etc., etc., etc. So we can reach those heights again, and it is my view that the way we will do that is by organising, recruiting, and activating. And by activating, I don't mean doing illegal things, because I don't condone or whatever or support illegal activity on this channel. So yeah, and so you might be saying, oh well, it's all very well saying that, Max, but what are you doing about it? So there's a series coming up which is going to kind of explain some ideas of how maybe to go about organising. Okay, so there you go. It's not just all empty words from me. In the meantime, take care.